Hi everyone, this is Kirk Simpson with Atlanta Carnivorous Gardens, going over a topic today that we probably get the most questions about. We always get questions in the comments about how do we fertilize our seedlings, what kind of fertilizer do we use, how do we apply it, what kind of strength do we use, all those types of things. So I wanted to go over that with today's video. So just to start with, fertilizer is basically just the process of adding nutrients to the media or directly to your plants to accelerate growth for seedlings. We find this really only is useful for seedlings. Some people fertilize their adult mature plants outdoors, but once they get to that size, we actually stop fertilizing. We put them outside. They capture plenty of insects, which is a good segue into kind of the overview for how this process should work. Now, Sarracenia are carnivorous plants, so they're adapted to live in soils that are very low in nutrient content. So usually they'll have a slow moving water source that leaches nutrients out of the soil, and that's why they're adapted to capture insects, because it supplements those nutrients that plants normally find in the soil. So before we go in any further, I just want to give a special thanks to Callan Hall. He's one of our recommended vendors, probably our favorite Sarracenia vendor to buy from. So if you're looking for new Sarracenia, definitely go check out his list. I'll post that in the description below so you can see. But all of this knowledge, really, Callan has been posting about this for years. He's been experimenting with fertilizing for years and is definitely an expert on this topic. So he was kind enough and generous enough to share a lot of his tips with me directly that I've applied here at Atlanta Carnivorous Gardens, and I'm hoping to share with you. But a lot of this information comes directly from Callan, so a special thanks to him. Definitely go check him out, follow him on Instagram, look at his plants. He's got some really, really nice stuff in his collection. So special thanks to Callan. So the last thing I want to cover in this intro is basically that fertilizing is 100% unnecessary for your seedlings. While it definitely speeds things up a lot if you have a lot of seedlings and you want to get them to a mature size quicker, if you don't fertilize, your plants will be 100% fine. They still grow pretty quick on their own. This is just a nice little boost you can give them to kind of get them over the top quicker and get them to the stage where they can go outside. So this is definitely, again, it's not necessary, but it's a really nice thing to do. And if you're interested, keep watching and we'll go through how we do it. So here are the tools you're going to need if you want to fertilize your Sarracenia seedlings at home. Obviously, the first thing you need is a good fertilizer. This is Maxi 16, 16, 16. Basically, those numbers just mean that it's balanced between nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. You don't need to worry about that, but this is kind of the end-all be-all for fertilizing carnivorous plants. It comes in this container. It's about 1.5 pounds. I think it's somewhere between $20 and $30. I got mine well over 2 years ago, and I'm still maybe halfway through it. So you're using teaspoons and tablespoons of this stuff. This is gonna last you a really, really long time. So definitely go ahead and invest in this. You can fertilize pretty much any carnivorous plant using this. So if you grow other species of Nepenthes, or sundews or things like that, you can definitely also use this on them. So it comes in really handy, definitely a worthwhile investment. We've experimented with things like Osmocote, the slow release pellets that you can get a little bit more widely available locally. We've had good results with that, but in the end, Maxi is really your best bet. So definitely recommend picking up 1.5 pounds of this. The next thing you're going to need is definitely a TDS meter. This one I think was between 10 and 15 bucks on Amazon. We'll have a link in our blog post to this one, but there's all kinds of these if you just go search for one on Amazon. TDS meters read basically what's called total dissolved solids. So it's good for basically determining how pure your water is. Now, like we mentioned, carnivorous plants don't like a lot of nutrients in their soil. And the best way to kind of read how much nutrient buildup is going on in your soil is to read the TDS of the water that leaches through that soil. You can see if you've got fertilizer basically building up within the soil and you need to let it kind of leach out, this is the best way to do that. But it also comes in handy for a lot of other things when you're growing carnivorous plants. If you're worried about your tap water supply, you're going to want one of these. And basically any reading usually below 50 is pretty safe. We're around 30 to 40 around here. And we use exclusively tap water. But yeah, it's a really good tool for checking that as well. But yeah, it's just handy to have and it's pretty cheap. And this will be kind of your number one thing if you're fertilizing your Sarracenia in the tray with their water. You're going to definitely want to have this handy because it will give you a warning if things are building up in your soil and you need to clean things out. The next thing, this is only necessary if you're actually going to be doing the first method that we're going to talk about, which is pitcher injection. But yeah, we messed around with a lot of things. You basically need just different tools to actually inject the fertilizer into the pitchers. So we used kind of little baby syringes, little art syringes and things like that. And what we found was that they were way too small, so we were constantly having to refill them and it would take even more time. Then we decided to experiment with this gigantic syringe here. And it holds a lot more liquid, obviously, but we found that it was kind of hard to use because you kind of had to use two hands and really aim it right. And it just wasn't very effective at actually being able to quickly go from seedling to seedling and get them all. So what we settled on, our best option, these are called bottle syringe applicators. They're used for like arts and for applying glues and paints and things like that. This came in a 10-pack on Amazon. I think it was like 12 bucks. So I think the only way you can get them is actually in packages of a few. But this is kind of the best medium thing. So you just fill up this bottle and it's very easy to use these. You just go from plant to plant and just fill up your pitchers and you're on your way. So that's really all you need. It should cost you, I don't know, maybe at tops 50 bucks to get all of this. But it's definitely worthwhile, and if you're going to fertilize, you're going to want these tools because they are very convenient to have on hand. You don't want to be worried about things like nutrients building up in your soil and potentially killing your plants. And then just your standard gallon jugs come in really handy as well. Most people obviously have those around the house, milk jugs, anything. But that's good for measuring out how strong your fertilizer is when you mix it. You can make sure that you're applying it in the correct rates. But again, this is all you need to really get started. Okay, so now that we've kind of gone over the basics of fertilizing, we're going to get into the first method. This is the method that I definitely recommend for beginners, people who are concerned about maybe applying fertilizer too strong or potentially just building up nutrients in their soil that are worried about that. This is the easiest method to do. Now, the only drawback to this method is that if you have a very large collection, it takes a lot more time, but it is the most effective way to actually fertilize your pitcher plants. They'll grow even faster using this method, and it's much safer because you're not actually putting any fertilizer into the soil, so you don't have to worry about that nutrient buildup. So this is the pitcher injection method, which is exactly what it sounds like. You're basically going to mix some fertilizer, and then use an applicator to basically go from plant to plant and fill up those pitchers. Now, remember, Sarracenia have specially adapted leaves for digesting insects, and one of the reasons they do this is so that they can supplement those nutrients that they don't get in the soil. So if you think about it, if you're taking fertilizer, which is formulated basically to supply exactly the nutrients they need, and you're just injecting it into the pitcher, what you're doing is basically fertilizing that plant in the way it was designed with basically the optimal blend of what it's actually looking for. So I've got right here 1 gallon jug worth of clean tap water. So before we get started, I'm just going to show you using my TDS meter what the reading is on my tap water. And hopefully you can read this from there. If not, I'll try to get up so the camera can see it. But let's see. So right now we're at about 32. It's settled at about 32 ppm. So like I said, that's pretty clean tap water. But yeah, that's with no fertilizer added. So now we're going to start adding Max C to this. The other benefit of this method is that you can actually use a much stronger fertilizer solution than if you were doing this in the soil, because you don't have to worry about that buildup again. So since you're doing this into the actual pitchers, I make this a little bit stronger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding basically a teaspoon scoop worth of Max C. And I'll try and get this where the camera can actually see in there. But if not, when I scoop it out, I'll show you. But this is what Max C looks like. It's derived from, make sure you can see that, but it's derived from seaweed actually. So it's this dark kind of gray color. Half of it is just a powder that dissolves really easily in liquids, and then there's also some kind of little pellets in there. Not sure exactly what's in there, but growers have basically figured out that this is the ideal fertilizer to use for all carnivorous plants. So I'm going to take basically a half teaspoon, maybe about a teaspoon there, and I'm going to mix it in here. And like I said, it dissolves really quickly. So once I put it in there and shake it up good, you can see the colors change basically really quickly as that's dissolved into this kind of brown color. It'll get a little bit more green the stronger you make it because, again, it's from seaweed, so just an interesting tidbit there. But now if we stick our TDS meter in here, and I might have to turn it back on and off, it's reading about 190 parts per million. Now again, that would be very strong for using in the soil, but because we're doing this into the pitchers directly, we can make it just a little bit stronger. So I'm going to put in probably, I don't know, another maybe half a teaspoon or so. I'm shooting for about 250. That's pretty safe, I would say. I've done that before and I've never noticed any adverse effects. I think some people use a lot stronger. Some people are a lot more conservative than I am. But yeah, definitely experiment with this and play around with the dosages just to see what works for you. Because, like I said, some people are more aggressive with it and they see really fast growth with no negative side effects. And then other people are probably a little bit safer. But play around with it, see what you're comfortable with, see how fast your plants grow. That's your ultimate judge. And then just kind of go from there. So we are at, looks like about 280 parts per million here. So just a little bit strong, but I'm not going to worry about it. Again, since this is going directly into the pitchers, I don't really have to worry too much about making sure it's not too strong. Once you've got this, I'm going to use these bottle applicators that I talked about earlier, and I'm going to use this little funnel. And I'm basically going to go from bottle to bottle, fill it up. I'm going to take all 10 of these out to the garage, and then I'll show you how it's actually applied. Okay, so we've moved out to the garage now where the actual plants are to show you this pitcher injection method. As you can see, I've got 10 of these little things filled up. I'll try and get you some close-ups so you can actually see what I'm doing, but it's pretty self-explanatory. So now that we're out here with the plants, I can go through kind of the pros and cons of this method as you go through and you're filling up your pitchers. So the pros are pretty obvious. You don't have to worry so much about mixing. There's a lot of safety there. You don't have to worry about nutrients building up in your soil or reading with your TDS meters a whole lot, understanding, you know, what levels are toxic to carnivorous plants, anything like that. You can use stronger fertilizer, so it's actually an even better method for getting your plants to grow quicker. So if I had unlimited time, this would be the method that I would choose. I obviously can't do that because I've got a lot of other things going on and I can only spend so much time out here. But if I had a small collection or if I had a lot of time and I just really wanted to do it big, I would be out here filling these pitchers every week and just making sure that they're constantly fertilized, and I would get great results with that. The cons become pretty clear kind of right away. You can see this is just one shelf of my seedlings actually. So I've got multiple of these and it would take a really long time to be able to do this to every individual seedling the way I would like to. The other con is when you have small seedlings, such as, I don't know, something like this size, the pitchers are too small to actually inject in many cases. If they're not, you can only get a little bit of fertilizer in there. And you can imagine that this is even more time consuming than when you have larger plants like this. So it's a little bit frustrating because when plants are this size, it takes a little while for them to get to this size. But once they get to this size, they kind of grow exponentially. They grow very fast because you can fertilize and you can be more aggressive and you can fill up the pitchers and things like that. But it can be frustrating when you have a bunch of small seedlings and you're waiting for them to ramp up. So that's another con. But again, this is the preferred method. If you're new and you're starting out, I would definitely start with this until you're comfortable. And then maybe if you have a large collection, you want to do a little bit of tray container fertilizing. We'll walk you through that as well. That's what we use here because we have such a large collection. But again, either of these methods is very effective. And this is a great way to give your plants a boost. So now we'll give you a little bit of a close-up to show you actually what we're doing, but it's pretty self-explanatory. You're basically just going and filling up each pitcher individually. One thing to keep in mind when you have tall, skinny pitchers, you don't want to fill those all the way up because they are very likely to topple over, spill your fertilizer everywhere, and then your pitcher is leaning to the side. So you want to avoid that, but that's really the only thing to keep in mind here. Okay, so I apologize for my head being cropped out and not actually being in the shot here, but it's more important that you see the plants than me. So I'm just going to go through and show you kind of here. So as I said, very self-explanatory. You're just going and you're going to fill every pitcher up to the maximum that you can. Like I said, if you have really tall, lanky pitchers, you don't want to fill them all the way. Just a little bit in there is enough to give them a nice boost, but you're going to go through and try and get at least 2 pitchers on every plant. But again, you can already see just how much time this is going to take. This is just a short clip, so I'll go through and fill all these later, but you don't have to sit around and watch me do this. But yeah, you can see with the big plants, it's very easy. With the smaller plants, it becomes much more involved and tricky. But yeah, that's the pitcher injection method. Now we'll move on to the tray fertilizer method, which is more effective for scaling with large collections like this. Okay, so our next method that we're going to cover is basically the tray fertilizer method. There's not a really good name for it, but basically it's what it sounds like. Rather than going and filling each pitcher individually, what you're going to be doing is mixing a fertilizer solution and dumping it into the tray that normally holds the water that your Sarracenia seedlings are growing in. So for this, basically think about it like you're fertilizing all at once, and then you're top watering, and then you're measuring your TDS levels after you water until those levels come back down where you need to fertilize again. Think about fertilizer really as the plant's actually eating. So the plants are actually consuming this, so that's as the TDS levels go down, the plants are actually consuming that and using that to grow quicker and to benefit their growth rate. So this is a little bit more art than science, so keep in mind that there's a lot of room to play around with this. You can start conservative, that's how I would recommend. Start with a lower level and then kind of build your way up as you get more comfortable. But some people, like we talked about, are more willing to take risks and be more aggressive, and will actually see good growth rates with that. There's just a higher risk of building up dissolved solids within your soil if you go that route. So the level that I aim for large seedlings is about 180 parts per million. So anywhere from 150 to 200, somewhere in that window is generally what I aim for. So I'll mix up a gallon of water with, I don't know, maybe about a teaspoon. I'll start small and then I'll keep reading until I get into that sweet spot right around 180. For small seedlings, you want to use a lower level just to be safe, so I target about 125 parts per million. Now keep in mind, larger seedlings are going to eat and consume the fertilizer much quicker than smaller seedlings as well. So you're going to need to refill your trays for your larger pitcher plants much more regularly than for the smaller ones. Another note is when you can start this, you definitely never want to start this when your plants are in humidity domes. The added humidity, the stagnant air, adding nutrients into that mix is just a really, really bad idea. Leads to a lot of algae growth, can lead to rot, can kill off your entire population. So definitely don't do it when they're in a humidity dome. But when you have decent sized seedlings that are out in the air and adjusted to ambient temperatures, yeah, feel free to give it a shot. So like I said, I start with a mixture of about 125 parts per million, which I start with about a half teaspoon per gallon to try and target that, and then keep adding more until I get there. So you're gonna dump that into the tray. And then the next part that's important is you want to let that fertilizer level go back down before you add any more. So how do we do that? Well, the most important step is to actually top water. So top watering, again, is exactly what it sounds like. You're going to use a hose with a breaker head or something like that to kind of break the water apart, and then you're going to actually fill your water trays by watering from above your pitcher plants and letting the water flow down through those drainage holes into the tray. Once that water drains down into the tray, it's actually pulling whatever's in the soil down with it, so you can get an accurate reading with your TDS meter to see what levels you're at. So on the blog post that will accompany this video, there will be kind of a sample schedule that'll show you maybe what you might expect. So let's say that you fertilize on Saturday, you're fertilizing large seedlings, and you fertilize with 180 parts per million mixture. Okay, so you do that on Saturday. You come back and water again, let's call it on Tuesday, and you check your TDS afterwards, and instead of 180, you might get 150. And then you water your seedlings again, let's say on Friday or the next Saturday, because they're bigger, they need to be watered more frequently, and you check it and it's, say, 110. And then you're going to keep doing this process until you get somewhere around like 50 to 80, somewhere in that kind of ballpark. You just want to make sure that your levels are going down and that you're letting it go all the way down, and then you're adding more fertilizer when the plants need it. So again, like I said, there's a lot of room to play with this. There's a lot of ambiguity, but for large collections, for people like myself that are trying to get a large amount of seedlings growing very quickly, don't have time to do the pitcher injection method, and want to start fertilizing their seedlings a little bit earlier, this is your best bet. This is the method that you should definitely try it out. And let us know what your experience is. If you have different recommendations, different experiences than we've had, definitely let us know. As always happy to answer any questions. I know a lot of this can be a little bit vague and unclear, but I'll do my best to answer as thoroughly as I can. But yeah, definitely go out there and read some of the materials online about using Max Seed with your Sarracenia seedlings. There's a lot of great materials online. But hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and subscribe if you want to follow along as we're growing our Sarracenia seedlings up. We're just about to start the fertilizing process on the seedlings that we started at the start of this video series. So that's very exciting. You can actually see some of this in action. But yeah, thanks again for watching. Have a great day.